Vectric just came out with an amazing update, version 12.5 for Aspire, VCarve, and Cut2D users. In this video, I'm going to be going over all of the amazing new features that are really going to help you boost your efficiency with the software. And before we get started, I just want to say that Learn Your CNC is celebrating 5 years since we started. And with that celebration, we are giving away 5 free seats to our Vectric Master Training course. This is our #1 training course on Vectric software. And if you want to enter that, I will have the link down below in the description. It is free to enter, and you can get multiple entries if you want to get in on that. The deadline is June 15th, 2025. If you're watching this after the deadline, you can also visit that page. We'll have a waiting list on there if you want to be alerted when we do more giveaways. If you do not know what our Vectric Master Training course is, this is one of our best training courses on teaching you everything you need to know from start to finish on how to use Vectric software. So if you're an absolute beginner, this will be a great place to start. And this will take you all the way up to advanced 3D modeling and rotary within Aspire and VCarve software. So if you want to learn more about the Vectric Master Training course, you can check out the link in the description as well. With that said, let's get back into our video and learn more about the updates in version 12.5. And before we get started, I want to let you know if you want to learn all of these updates in one location, you can go to the help menu in your Vectric software and click on what's new, and that will take you to Vectric's page that tells you all of the new features and a little bit more about each one. Also, this is considered a minor update because it's a 0.5 version. So if you already have version 12, this is a free update for you. All you have to do is go to your Vectric portal account and download the new update. This will open up as a brand new software, so it'll be separate from your version 12. So just in case you don't like the new updates, you can still use your older version 12, but you will have the version 12.5 with all of the new features as well. Let's get back into the software and take a look at all of these updates. There's quite a few updates, and some of these updates have been things I've been asking for years, so I'm really glad to see they're finally inside of Vectric software. And for these updates, I split them up into 3 categories. We're going to be looking over the design updates, the Toolpath updates, and some of the user interface updates. So let's get started, and we're going to be looking at the design updates first. So let's look at update number 1, and that is the full node editing ability inside of the 3D view. In previous versions, you could edit nodes inside of the 3D view, but you didn't have all the functionalities inside of the 3D view. Now in version 12.5, you can select objects, go to the node edit mode by clicking the letter N on your keyboard, or you can also right click on your vectors and go to the node edit mode. But now you can actually click on a node and you can actually specify the exact point in your project where you want that node to be. You can right click on objects and have all of the full node editing capabilities directly inside of your 3D view. So no more need for switching back and forth between the 2D and 3D view. This is especially useful for those of you that have Aspire that are custom 3D modeling things in the 3D view. You don't have to keep going back and forth. So this will really boost your efficiency inside of the 3D view. Let's take a look at our second update. So this one is going to be switching between the node edit mode and the shape drawing tools. In previous versions, we had the spacebar shortcut key to go quickly to the previous tools that we used. However, in version 12, they had to remove that because of other functionalities. So a way they kind of brought that back is now being able to node edit while you have a tool open. So let's say, for example, we are creating a shape and we want to edit this shape. You can just click the letter N on your keyboard. Now I can go to node edit mode and edit the shape if I needed to. And you'll see the tool is still open in our design panel. So no longer do we have to close the tool, edit it, and then go back to the tool. You can now keep everything open and still node edit while you create more shapes. So this will be useful when you are creating shapes and you want to quickly node edit the shape, and then you want to draw another shape right after that outside of the node edit mode. So you do not have to keep going back and forth between that last tool that you had open. So still not quite like the spacebar that we had before, but it is an improvement over the last version 12. All right, let's take a look at our next update, and that is line length editing and polyline precise mode in the 3D view. And what this is, inside of the 3D view, when you create a line, you now have the ability to specify the length of the line. You can see right on my cursor, I can see the length. I can type that in just like we could before. So let's say I wanted to make a 6-inch line and click enter. That will create the line. Now what else we have ability to do is you can see there's a little arrows next to that text box. So if I click the up or the down arrow, you'll see this will switch between different modes for creating lines. And these are all the modes that are already available in the form to be able to put the X and Y location, the angle and the length, or the next consecutive X and Y dimension from that previous point. So those are all 3 different options you can do directly in the 3D view now without having to type in the form, just by clicking your up and down arrow keys. So let's say I wanted to click the arrow key down to go to the angle function. And let's say I wanted to go to negative 22.5 degree angle. I can click enter on that. And now I just need to specify the length. So let's say I wanted it at 4 inches and click enter. Now it just created a line at that same angle that we had specified. And it'll actually lock into that angle unless you want to change it afterwards. And then once you're done, you can right click and that will create that line exactly the specification you gave it. Now, not only that, once you are done creating a line, we can go to the node edit mode and click on that line. And now you can see we can actually specify the length of that line after it's already created. So let's say I wanted that to be 6 inches instead. I can click on the line, click 6, click enter, and now I just edited that line, the length of it, without having to do any extra steps. So it's a really quick way to edit those lengths of the lines, and this could be with a closed vector or an open vector as well. So it's just going to make it much quicker to be able to edit these lines inside of your 3D view. All right, let's take a look at update number 4 for our design updates. So this one is going to be better bitmap fading and WebP file support. So with the popularity of AI images and a lot of online images, WebP file format has become a little bit more popular these days. So now Vectric has support to directly import those file types. And not only that, when you import a file, doesn't matter what kind of image file, the bitmap fading will be much better. And I can show you a side-by-side example of this. If you look at this image that I imported, when you select the image, it's full color. And then when you deselect it, it usually fades the color a little bit. In previous versions, it didn't look as good as it does right now. You can see this looks really vibrant and you can see all the colors very well. If I go to a previous version, this one's version 12, and look at the same image, and you'll see when I select it, it looks full color, looks great. But when I deselect it, it kind of washes out a lot of the color. And you see there's a lot of white areas. And depending on the image, sometimes it could be really hard to see what the image is without clicking on it. So in version 12.5, they have updated that, and now you can see the colors are much better. Now you still have the ability to adjust the fading if you wanted to, just by selecting the image, right-clicking on it, and go to Appearance, and then you can adjust the fading in here if you needed it lighter or darker. So you still have that ability, but now you don't have to do that as much because it is much better in version 12.5. So that is a little bit of improvements on image importing for version 12.5. Now let's take a look at our next update, which is dynamic dimensions in the 3D view. So not only can you have dimensions in the 3D view, let's take a look at what that looks like. As you can see, when you use the dimension tool, which is inside of Vectric, you can create all your dimensions on the screen, just like you could in previous versions, except now we can do it in 3D. And not only that, these dimensions are also dynamic. So what that means is, let's say we adjusted the size of this shape and now our dimensions are all off. You can see they're no longer where they were before. So what we can do is select that dimension, grab this endpoint and just move it to the new location. And you'll see when I do that, the dimension actually updates automatically on screen. You'll see this height right now is 6 inches. If I snap it to the correct locations where I want it, you can see it dynamically updates to the correct dimension. Same thing with angles. You can adjust angles as needed. You just have to snap to the endpoints and you can move all these endpoints wherever you need them and it will dynamically update to your new dimension. So this works with all different types of dimensions within Vectric software. So it's a really quick way. In previous versions, if you had to update the dimension, you would have to delete all of the ones you already have and then create all new ones. In this one, now all we have to do is move those endpoints and all your dimensions are already updated. This is a really good improvement that they made that's going to make it much quicker to work with dimensions on the screen. And like I said, this works in the 3D view, and you can also see the dimensions will update in the 2D view as well. So let's take a look at our next update for designs, and that is using actual sheets in the plate production tool. So if you don't know what this is, the plate production tool is a tool that you can use to quickly engrave nameplates, or you can think of trophy plates or even a hotel number sign, anything like that, to quickly import data and quickly engrave it onto something. In previous versions, this all created them on layers, and it would stack the layers on top of each other and you would have to hide the extra layers. In version 12.5, now they have the ability to automatically generate the sheets instead of using layers. So this is just a minor improvement, but really significant. If you use the plate production tool, this will help you keep everything organized much better rather than putting them all on one sheet. All right, let's take a look at our next update. And this one is a new feature called the part selection feature. And what this is if you want to quickly select all of this one part, sometimes you have other parts that are nearby it that can make it hard to select everything that you need to do. So now what you can do is just right click on any of the vectors included in that part, go to select, and then go to part. And when you click on that, that will automatically select everything that is within that part. And basically, as long as there's an outline around the entire parts, it will select everything until it gets to that final outline. So you can think of, if you have a cabinet and you have a dado in the cabinet, you can right click on the dado and it will select all of the cabinet part. Or if you have a piece of furniture or a sign or anything like that, where you have multiple shapes inside of another, you can just right click, select part, and it will select everything within that single part. And now I can quickly move this somewhere else without having to individually select different shapes within that part. So it's a really quick way to select things, just going to give you a little bit more efficiency, especially when you have a lot of nested objects near each other. All right, let's take a look at our next update, and that is using the design sheet when nesting. And for this, I'm going to show you version 12, what this used to look like. And basically when you nest a bunch of parts, you'll typically see a sheet that's left over that's blank. And that is your first initial design sheet. And this is kind of a minor issue, but it is definitely helpful that Vectric added this, because now we don't have to deal with deleting that sheet later on. This is just going to save us some time. So in version 12.5, when you use the nesting feature, you can see it'll automatically get rid of that sheet if you select that option. So in the nesting tool, you're going to see an option at the bottom that says Overwrite Active Sheet. And you can see that down there at the bottom. So what that's going to do is allow you to delete that original sheet and then create all brand new sheets without having a leftover blank sheet. So like I said, that's just a minor thing, but if that's something that always annoyed you, like it did with me, it's really great to have that little checkbox that can save you some time of having to delete that sheet later on. All right, back to our updates. Let's go to update number 9. And this one is different tools that you can now use inside of the 3D view. So Vectric has really been focusing on making their 3D view more interactive and more useful for all of the tools. And some new tools they've added that you can use in the 3D view that could not be used previously is now the Draw Text tool, the Trim tool, the Extend Vectors tool, and the Fillet tool, with some new additional features that I'll be showing you in the next update. But let's take a look at Draw Text. So you can see now we can type in some text inside of the 3D view, which makes it real quick. And we can use the Trim tool inside of the 3D view. And you can also see if you hover over something, it's going to highlight it in red, what's going to be trimmed. That's something that we didn't have before. So now you'll know exactly what's going to be trimmed before you actually click there. So that is another really cool feature that they've added, so you can avoid making mistakes if you accidentally went to trim something that you didn't want to. And then, like I said, we can also use the Extend tool in the 3D view. So now you can click on two lines that have an intersection and they will extend together. And then finally, we also have the fillet tool that we can use to create fillets in the 3D view if you wanted to round some corners over. And once again, you can visualize what that looks like before you actually click it. So that's another new thing that they've added. That's really helpful when you want to visualize something before you actually take the steps and have to undo it later if you messed it up. So those are some new updates for the 3D view. Now let's take a look at what I was mentioning about the interactive fillet tool that we now have. So if we go back to the fillet tool and let's make this fillet a little bit larger, let's say we make it 6 inches. And now if we go to the 3D view, you can see when I hover over a corner, it's going to show me exactly what this is going to look like before I even click it. And you'll see if we go to the 2D view, we never had that before. We couldn't see what it was going to look like. We have to actually click on it, see what it looks like, and then undo it if we didn't like it. But now in the 3D view, if you hover over something, you can see exactly what it's going to look like before you even click it. And then if you like it, you can just click it and it will apply that change. And then if you don't want to have that fillet, you can also hover back over it. You'll see what it looks like with the square corner and you can click on it to remove the fillet. And it also works with the other dog bone fillets as well. So you can see it will give you a visualization what that would look like. Another thing that they've updated, if it's not going to work in that location, you'll see a cross through the fillet icon. So that's just letting you know it's not going to work there with the fillet type and the size that you specified. So that means you have to change something to make it work. And another thing, if you try to make a really large fillet, let's say 10 inches, and I try to hover over this spot where it's not going to fit all the way, it will actually reduce the fillet to where it will work, but it gives you an alert letting you know that it's going to do that. So that way you don't have to keep guessing on the number for the radius that's going to fit there. It will actually tell you the exact radius that's going to fit and it will automatically reduce it. It does give you a little warning on your icon showing you that it is reduced. So when you click on it, it will still work without having to type in a bunch of numbers to guess what will work. So to me, this is a really awesome feature. That's something I always had to go back and forth with. I always try to make a nice smooth radius and I would always be guessing the number. And now we can just type in any number that is larger than the fillet that we want and it'll automatically reduce it for us. So really cool feature. Make sure you check that out if you want to play around with it, and definitely should save you a lot of time. All right, so that is all the design updates I have for you. Let's take a look at our Toolpath updates, which some of these are some really cool updates that I want to share with you guys because these are some features I really wanted Vectric to add and they finally have them. So let's take a look at that. So our update number 1 with Toolpaths is the removal of redundant safe Z moves. So if you don't know what this is, let's take a look at an example. So here is an example of a pocket toolpath. And this is just a simple circle pocket with a couple depth per pass. And what I did was I recreated this toolpath exactly the same way inside of version 12, which is the previous version. And let's take a look at that side by side. So here is version 12 with the same exact parameters as version 12.5. And you'll see one major difference here. It's very simple, but it adds time to your toolpath. And that is this red line traveling across here. What that is basically a wasted time that it's doing traveling across here with your safe Z height. So what that basically does is lifts up your machine, moves over, and then drops back down. And what Vectric did was remove those redundant movements to allow you to save time on your toolpath. It's a very simple update, but something that's definitely going to save you time when you create larger and larger scale toolpaths where a lot of those safety Z heights are going to eat up some of the time on your toolpath machining. So if we look at this again in version 12.5, you could see that redundant movement there has been removed. So that's basically all that update is. But like I said, it's really going to save your time on that movement. Vectric also added some optimizations inside of the post-processor settings. So if you want to dig into that, you can check out what else they've added there as well. So now let's take a look at our next update. And that is update number 2. And this is sketch carving preview in the 3D view. This is something really cool that I've always wished they had when they first came out with the sketch carving toolpath. And if you remember this toolpath, when you create it as a preview, you have to always have your 2D view open to be able to see what's highlighted in green that will be carved. And then you can adjust your line thickness. Now in version 12.5, you can now see it in the 3D view. So you can actually see what this is going to look like in the 3D view before you even carve it. You can also make your image visible if you want to see that as well. Or you can turn the image off so you can see exactly what the toolpath is going to look like. And then once you're happy with it, you click calculate and that will generate the toolpath. But now, like I said, you can see it inside of the 3D view. And then as you can see, we would have a quick carving from that image. So once again, this is just a minor thing they changed, but it's going to make a really big difference in your workflow where you don't have to keep switching back and forth to the 2D and 3D view. All right, let's take a look at our next update. That's update number 3. And update number 3 is a new laser sketch carving toolpath inside of Vectric. So if you have the laser module, and you do have to be using a compatible laser to be able to get this, this is an added update that you have to pay for, but there is a brand new toolpath that you may notice inside of the laser module. And you'll see that's this one here, laser sketch carving. So let's say, for example, we had a 3D model that we wanted to engrave rather than do a long 3D carve on. So here's one that I got from the clip art library. And what you can do is either bring in a model or an image. And now with this laser sketch carving toolpath, we can select that. And we also have the ability to preview it in the 3D view, just like with the normal one, now in version 12.5. But now we have the ability to do a laser toolpath on this. So you can adjust the settings just like you can with the regular sketch carving toolpath. And once you're happy with it, you can calculate it. And this is going to be able to do with 3D models or images. And now if we take a look at this preview, you can preview what it would look like as a laser engraving rather than a 3D carving or with the regular sketch carving toolpath. So for those of you that have lasers, this is going to be a really cool update for you guys to be able to quickly engrave something with a lot of detail without taking the long time it would take to 3D carve this. So just another option you can provide people if you want to do different types of signs for different clients or different customers, or even for yourself. All right, so that is one of the new updates on the laser toolpath that has been added. Let's take a look at our next update. And that update is support for the pass depth and the cut depth for the laser toolpath. And this is specifically for those of you with the laser module with the laser cut and fill toolpath. So if you open that one up, in previous versions, they did not have the cut depth or number of passes in there. And they just added a few more features in there to be able to have a little bit more control over your laser toolpaths. So for those of you using lasers, check out this toolpath. A lot of cool new features in there for you to explore. All right, let's take a look at update number 5. And that is the simulation of surface color. And this is a pretty cool update. I'm going to show you what it looks like if we go to the preview. And let's preview a toolpath that I created here. This is a simple VCarve toolpath. And let's say we were carving this, but we wanted to paint the surface of the wood and we wanted to know what this would look like. In previous versions, you can only change the color of the sheet and the color of the toolpath. You could not change just the surface color. Now we have that ability. You'll see in version 12.5, if we zoom in here, you can see our new option here is called surface color. So if we select that option, you can now change the color of just the surface and it will not change the inside of your cuts. So the inside of your cut could stay the wood or whatever material you're cutting. And now we can change just the surface color if you wanted to. So it's a really cool way to see what this would look like if you painted just the surface and not the inside of your cuts. And then we still have the ability to change the other colors such as the sheet, and you can play around with the different color options as well. But this is a pretty cool feature that they've added if you wanted to preview something like this. This will be really good if you're using this on color core material, for example. You can make the surface color one color and then the inside of your cut another color by changing the sheet color. And that will show you quickly what this would look like in different materials. So pretty cool feature that you can definitely play around with inside of Vectric software. All right, let's look at number 6 for our toolpath updates. And this one's a big one. This one is Toolpath estimation time improvements. So for those of you that have ever tried to estimate how much time your toolpaths are going to take and find that the numbers don't match up quite right to the actual cut times, Vectric has made a new improvement that is definitely going to help you out. And if we go to the estimate time button that we always had before, you're going to notice a new option in here. And if we zoom in on this, you'll see what's called machine acceleration. So this is going to be a really cool update that will allow you to quickly get your time to be a lot more accurate than you could before. Before, there was a scale factor and you kind of had to guess at this number. There was no specific number. You kind of play around with it, and it's more of a trial and error rather than an exact science. Now with this new machine acceleration, you can set specific parameters for your actual machine. So what that would look like is in your machine database, you can actually type in the XYZ acceleration parameters. Now these numbers you'll have to get either from your manufacturer or maybe from your controller settings. But once you do have these numbers, this will make your cut times a lot more accurate because they're for your specific machine rather than guessing some kind of scale factor number. So once you have these inputted in here and you apply that, they will now show up in your machine acceleration and give you a much better time estimate. And then if you still like the scale factor better, you can switch back and forth between scale factor or machine acceleration. So just a new option that you'll have to be able to get a little bit better and more accurate machine time estimates. All right, let's take a look at Toolpath update number 7. And this one is going to be for those of you using drilling toolpaths. So in previous versions, I'll show you what it looks like first. And you can see in version 12 or earlier versions, when you're using the drill toolpath and you are drilling holes, you'll see in the 3D view, it just looks like a bunch of lines. And it's hard to tell exactly what's going on with all these lines. In version 12.5, they have updated this to make it a little bit better to visualize in the 3D view. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So as you can see in the 3D view, if I turn on the drilling toolpath, you will be able to see now the representation of where these holes are actually going to drill, and you'll see the diameter, and if you're doing a peck drilling, you'll also see every depth per pass. So it's going to be a much easier way to visualize. Once again, another minor update, but really good improvement to be able to quickly visualize these a lot better. All right, you ready to hear about one of my favorite updates that they've added? This is Toolpath update number 8, and this is the ability to copy or move toolpaths to a different sheet or to a different side if you're doing a double-sided project. This is one of the best features I think they've added that's going to save so much time. In previous versions, you had to do all kinds of workarounds just to copy a toolpath to a new sheet or to a different side. Now you can just do it by right-clicking on it, and you'll have the option right away to do that. This is going to save me so much time in my projects. But now you can see if you right-click on a toolpath, you now have the ability to copy to or move to, and then you have other side if you're doing a double-sided project, or you can copy to another sheet if you have multiple sheets in your project. Like I said, this is going to save so much time, and one of the features I've been asking for forever, so thank you Vectric for adding this. I'm super excited to use this in my future projects. And with that said, make sure you keep watching for some of the other improvements they've made that are very similar to this coming up. But before we get to that, let's take a look at our next Toolpath update. And that is sheet-specific toolpath groups. This is another one of those things that I wish they had before because it was very confusing. But if you don't know what I'm talking about here, I will show you an example of a previous version. And you'll see this is a example where we have multiple sheets and multiple toolpaths for each sheet. If you take a look at this, each sheet has been created its own group of toolpaths. However, the active sheet that we see here, it's showing not only those toolpaths, but it's also showing the groups from the other toolpaths on the other sheets. And that was always confusing for people because they don't know what all these empty groups are here. And you may want to delete those, but if you actually delete those, it actually removes the toolpaths from those other sheets. So it's very confusing. And you'll see if you were to drop down to go to another sheet, it would now show you just that toolpath and all the other ones would be empty groups right now. But like I said, it was just very confusing and not a really good way of doing that. Let's take a look at what that looks like in version 12.5 now. You'll see this is the exact same file example, But now when we look at the toolpaths, you can see it is much cleaner. Now we only see the toolpaths for this specific sheet. And if I drop this down and select another sheet, now I see only the toolpaths for that sheet. So it's no longer confusing with a whole bunch of toolpaths for all the different sheets. Now you only see what you're working with on that specific sheet. At any time, you can also click all sheets if you want to see everything. But if you want to just stick with one sheet, you can just select that one. And it's much simpler and much more streamlined to find those toolpaths that you're looking for, and much less confusing. So once again, another great update from Vectric on that one. All right, let's look at update number 10 with the toolpaths, and that is showing uncalculated toolpaths. This is another one of those things. It's just a small update, but it makes a major difference because now, as you can see, we have a toolpath in here that has not been calculated yet. We imported this toolpath from a template, and since it's not calculated, it will show as italic in the text, and it'll show a little alert icon next to your tool letting you know this toolpath has not been calculated. So that lets you know right away just by looking at it that we might have to do something with that toolpath. This will save you a lot of mistakes because sometimes you may save your G code without calculating a toolpath, and when you go to cut it on your machine, it's not doing what you want it to do, and that may have been the reason. In older versions, you didn't know that. They all look the same. Now in version 12.5, we have that ability to quickly see that toolpath is uncalculated. So another one of those minor little things that makes a big difference. Okay, and for our last toolpath update that we have is the option to use tool names for multi-tool toolpaths. And this is another one of those things. Minor change, but makes a big difference. I'll show you what I mean by this. In previous versions, when you select a shape, and let's say we did a V-carving toolpath, for example, and we're going to use multiple tools on this. So we have a 90-degree V-bit, and we have a large clearance tool. And now when I click calculate, you'll see the toolpath name. It says VCarve 1, clear 1, VCarve 1. So it's very confusing, especially if you're new, what both of these mean. And what they actually mean is one is the end mill clearance tool and one is the V-carving bit. But since they both almost say the same thing, it could be a little bit confusing. So Vectric has added a new option that you have to turn on to be able to distinguish between those two. I recommend turning it on, and I'll show you where you can find that. And that is by going to Edit, Options, and then you're going to scroll down until you see Toolpath Settings, and then you'll see where it says Append Clear Tool Name to the toolpath. And you want to switch that to Yes. And then you can click Apply and then OK. And now, if I calculate that same toolpath, let's close this, select the same vector, create the same exact toolpath. We're not going to change anything else. We're just going to click Calculate. And now let's zoom in and see what we have. Now, as you can see, the clearance tool tells you exactly what tool it is. It takes the name from your tool database and enters that directly in there. So now whatever tool name you have, we'll put in that clear tool, especially when you have a long list of different clearance tools. This is going to save you a lot of time and headaches of figuring out which tool is which. So another one of those things I wish they've added earlier, but I'm glad we have it now. So check that out if you haven't already. It's a really cool feature that they've added. Now that we've seen a lot of great updates, there is some more updates that you're going to be really happy with. So let's take a look at some of the user interface updates that they've made. Starting out with update number 1, that is adding guidelines and grids in the 3D view. So you may have noticed in the top left corner, there's a new icon here, and that is toggling the guideline visibility on and off. So if you don't know what guidelines are, that's in the top ruler here. You can drag one down, or in the left ruler, you can drag one over. And these are basically construction guidelines you can use for creating different shapes and different patterns. In previous versions, there was a hidden button between those two rulers where you can click on and off to hide the visibility of those. And that is still there if you like that one there. But now there's a new button inside of the 2D view in the upper left corner. You can toggle that on and off. But not only that, when we switch to the 3D view, you can see that same button is in here in the 3D view. And if we click that on and off, you can now see the guidelines and edit them inside of the 3D view. So not only can you move them around, you can adjust the angle of them and do all kinds of things quickly inside of the 3D view, which is going to save you a lot of time because they are a little bit harder to adjust inside of the 2D view, especially the angle. Now you can adjust the angle really easily inside of the 3D view. And then if they're ever in your way, you can always turn the visibility on and off directly in the top left corner with all your visibility settings. So that's just one update they have with the guidelines. Let's take a look at our next update. And update number 2 is guideline and grid customization. So not only can we see the guidelines in the 3D view, we can now also turn on our grid and see the grid in the 3D view as well. So now you can see both guidelines and grids are in the 3D view. Not only that, one major update they made here for these guidelines and grids, one that my students always ask me about, especially those of you with vision problems, is the ability to change the color and the size of both the grids and the guidelines. So if we go to Edit, Options, and then if you scroll down to the 3D view settings, you will see some new options for guideline color, both as a active and a locked guideline. You can change the guideline thickness, you can change the grid color, and also the grid point widths. So you can see if the grid points were too small for you, you can turn this up by just changing to a different number. Let's click 10. And not only that, we can also click apply now and see the update right away without having to close down this form. And like I said, you can change the color as well. So if you want something more vibrant, you can select that. And now you can see in the 3D view, it has been updated. So this will be all within your 3D view. You'll be able to see the grids and the guidelines much better if you want to adjust their settings all directly inside of your options. So like I said, if you guys have vision problems or you just don't like the colors of the default grids and guidelines, go play around with those settings. You may find something that works much better for you. And if they're ever in your way, you can also turn off the visibility on and off at any time directly with your toggle buttons. All right, let's take a look at our next update, and that is update number 3, layer dragging and layer filtering. This is another cool update that they've added, something minor, but something definitely important. And that is the ability to drag layers. So for example, if you want to click on a layer, you can now drag it up and down the list to move it. In previous versions, you could not do that. It's something simple, but makes it very effective to be able to quickly move those. Another really cool feature they added is very small, but like I said, very powerful. And that is what's called a layer filter. You may notice this little filter button down here at the bottom. I can zoom in on that so you can see it. It's just a filter button there. You'll see I have a layer that's called sheet 2 layer. All the rest of the layers are on sheet 1 right now. So if I jump over to my second sheet that I have, and let's jump over to sheet number 2. Now let's say we're working on the sheet and we want to create our own objects on here. All of these layers are still visible and none of these layers are on this sheet. So it's just very confusing to see all these layers. Now if we click on that filter button, you can see it will now optimize this to show only the layer that is on this sheet. So if you have multiple layers on this sheet only, it will show all of those layers in this list. And then when we go back to sheet number 1, as long as we have that filter turned on, and you'll see if I turn that on, it does have to make sure it's not the active layer. So we do have to switch the active layer to something else. If we turn the filter back on, it removes that sheet 2 layer. So any layers on a different sheet, they will not be visible with the filter on different sheets. So it's a really cool feature they've added to be able to quickly see what layers are on each sheet individually. And you'll have that in your layer dropdown, and you will also have it in your layers tab on the left. You'll see a filter button up at the top. And then here you can also click and drag your layers into new locations as well. So just a couple minor updates they've made to layers, but really cool features that they've added. All right, let's take a look at update number 4. That is resizable drop-down menus. So you may have noticed this layer list I have is getting pretty long, and it actually automatically updated to the size of this list. In previous versions, the list would be really small like this, and you would have a scroll wheel, you'd have to scroll down. Now, all 3 of these drop-downs that we have up here, sheets, layers, and levels, you can now click on this corner and change the size. So you can now make it really small if you wanted to and keep that scroll bar on the side. Or if you want to make it larger, you can make it as big as you want. So if you have a really long layer name, you'll be able to see that name really easily in here. So that's a really cool update that they've added. Once again, just one of those simple things, but it's going to make your life a lot easier within the software. All right, let's take a look at update number 5. This one is 3D model import improvements. And this is for if you're doing rotary or even just regular 3D models. I'll show you an example. If we import a 3D model and select a model that we want to import, and let's say, for example, this spoon 3D model that we want to import. I'm going to first scale it down and center it into our project. And in previous versions, if your model came in at a little bit of an angle, this could be with a regular single or double-sided or even a rotary project, it was very difficult to straighten that out in previous versions. You used to have to grab this circle and kind of freehand spin it to try to line it up perfectly, and you weren't able to actually type in an exact angle. Now, as you can see, when you click on this circle, either the X, Y, or Z axis, you can now type in an exact angle. So now, instead of guessing and just freehand spinning this, you can now type an exact angle. Let's say we wanted 45 degrees, you can click enter, and now that will go exactly 45 degrees. And of course, you can change this, whatever angle this needed to be, if you needed it flattened out or something like that, and then you can import it. So once again, minor update, but a major difference it's gonna make when importing 3D models. So that's something you can play around with when you import your models. Now let's take a look at our next update, and that is duplicating the sheets function. So just like we can duplicate Toolpaths before, here's a new function we can do, and that is actually duplicating a sheet entirely. This is gonna save you so much time. Let's say we have multiple sheets and one of them was different than the rest, and you wanted to copy that to a new sheet. You can just right click on the sheet now and click duplicate, and that will duplicate the entire sheet. And now if we drop this back down, you can see we now have a duplicate of that first sheet. Not only does it duplicate the sheet itself with all the parameters, it will also duplicate any data that you have on that sheet, such as vectors, images, or 3D models. It'll also duplicate any functions that you've added to that sheet, such as level clipping or mirroring or anything like that. So all of that will now duplicate. And not only that, it will also duplicate all of your toolpaths. So that's another major thing. Not only can you duplicate the whole sheet and all the things that are on that sheet, all the toolpaths will come with it. So it's a really quick way to be able to copy things and duplicate them. You'll see now they all show up as uncalculated. That's why they added that new feature. Now we can quickly see that none of these toolpaths have been calculated because they're on the duplicated sheet. So now we can go in and check all those and do what we needed to do, or we can click recalculate all to quickly recalculate them. So it's a really cool feature they've added. It's going to save so much time. This is amazing that they've added this. I can't wait to play around with this even more. All right, let's jump back into our next update, and that is update number 7 with the interface. That is duplicating layers. So not only can we duplicate toolpaths and sheets, we can now duplicate layers as well. So if you drop down your layer list, right click on a layer, there is now a duplicate layer button. And if you just click on that, that will duplicate the layer and keep all of the vectors and anything that's on that layer. So now it's just been duplicated. So that is a quick way to duplicate layers, and then you can edit them afterwards as needed. So once again, something that's going to make you much more efficient when it comes to duplicating things. Now let's take a look at our next update, number 8, and that is the added bake to component right-click menu. And what this is going to be more for Aspire users, but when you are 3D modeling and you want to bake objects together, in previous versions you had to select those objects and then go in your modeling tools and find the bake button. Sometimes that was a little time consuming to find that. Now you can just right click on it in your component tree and there is a new bake button right in your right click menu. So that's just going to make it real quick to be able to bake objects together in your 3D modeling workflow. All right, let's take a look at our next update, number 9, and this is improved color selection in your option menus. So if we go to edit and then go to options, you will see if you scroll down to your colors, in previous versions, there was just 3 little dots that you had to select to open up your color panel. Now you can just click directly on the color and quickly switch it and then click OK. And not only that, you now have the ability to click apply. This apply button was not here before. In previous versions, you had to click OK, and then you would see the update. And then if you didn't like it, you'd have to go back and change it and keep going back and forth. So for example, if I wanted to change the background color in the 3D view, I can click on that, select a new color, click OK, click apply, and instantly see it before I even close this down. If I don't like it, I can click on the color again, choose a different color, click OK, click apply, and I can still see it. And I do not have to keep clicking OK to close it down to see it, and then have to go back and find my options to go change it again. So this is something that's just going to make it a little bit quicker for you to be able to quickly edit your colored options. Now, our last update on the user interface is going to be a new blue color theme option in your edit options. So if you go to edit options, and then if you scroll down until you see general settings, you will see a button that says theme. And if you drop that down and switch it to the blue theme and click apply, you will see everything adjust to this blue color theme. So if you like that, you can change it. If you don't, you can keep it default. I personally like the default better, so that's where I'll be keeping it. But if you like that blue theme, you can explore it and try it out. So that is all the updates I have to share with you. Hopefully you found some of those useful, and they're definitely going to make you much more efficient in the software. So make sure you explore those and play around with them. Let me know down below in the comments which one was your favorite. I know that the toolpath and the sheet duplication is definitely one of my favorites. But let me know which one is your favorite down below in the comments. If you want to see more great videos like this, make sure you like and subscribe for more. I'll catch you in the next one.